Welcome to the Culture and Leadership Podcast. Here we are today with Mark from Yeovil College. Mark, can you tell me a little bit about your journey in FE and who you are?
Yes, I started working in further education very, very part-time in probably 2004, 1994, 5, so a really long time ago, probably going 30 years, nearly 30 years, but it was very part-time to begin with, one session a week, which a friend tried to get me to do, and it was revealed why he was finding it so difficult to find someone, because it was at Friday night on 6 o'clock.
What was it
till 9 o'clock, teaching desktop publishing. And as an illustrator, I didn't know an awful lot about computers, but his take on it was, well, it's all kind of design and stuff, isn't it? You must be able to use a computer. And that wasn't actually true. But I did learn fairly quickly and applied the same knowledge about graphic design as I did desktop publishing. And I kind of enjoyed it. It was really weird. I was working with a really eclectic bunch of mainly adults in a part of Gateshead College. And it was just a bit weird and addictive. They were really lovely people who wanted to learn, and I kind of bounced off that a bit. And then over the next 3 or 4 years, I ended up working a few more hours in further education, till finally in '98, I took a full-time role and the title was at the time, course team leader for Apple Mac design.
So we wore you down eventually.
How times have changed. Yeah, so I was an illustrator. There wasn't lots and lots of illustration work out there in the 90s, just as Photoshop arrived on the scene.
Yep.
For a painter, so needs must. And I just really enjoyed it.
And interestingly, you're the first principal CEO that I've spoken to that came through a route of teaching adults before they taught students, or I should say young people. Most people I speak to have been working with young people as they enter. So adults got you hooked, seeing the progress for those adults.
I'm not sure if I could say it was the adults, although I really enjoyed teaching the group. So, across the next 3 or 4 years, I ended up teaching more adults, some high needs stuff, community stuff, and then kind of traditional 16 to 18 stuff. But I suppose that in that very first instance, those people who wanted to learn, that was really quite motivating. And I suppose you get very similar ingredients, regardless of how old people are. People who want to learn are like strangely engaging, aren't they? It's nice to be there with them and support them in that journey where they want to be something better, different, more.
And you get the impact quicker. For those that really come in and ready to learn and are motivated, you see.
I think that's true.
And that is, I like the word addictive.
I think that's true. I suppose, though, where I feel in the past where I have made the biggest difference, it was with those learners who were furthest away from their potential. And excuse me French, but when they came along, they were a bit raggy-arsed and had a slightly checkered past.
Yes.
And I can remember one particular learner, and I will protect his name because he actually now works in further education. But he'd had a very, very checkered history in school. And he came to me and a colleague. We interviewed him for a place on a course. And at the end of the interview, after this young person had left, we both looked to one another and checked, was he on drugs? Because we genuinely thought that he wasn't quite with us in the room, but he came to us, and we had a nightmare first year with him, and then it clicked for him, and he just flew. And he went on to university. He did a first degree, then he did a second degree, and this kid came without a GCSE, and his life was transformed, and now he works in further education, as well as running his own practice in design, and that is so motivating.
See it full circle.
It's just awesome.
So how long have you been a leader in further education then? Technically the first full-time job?
I suppose, but yeah, from a who does provide leadership in further education, I would think that's true. But my first role where I was managing people was in 2003 at a college in the Northeast, and we had a brilliant manager. She was really brilliant, and she told us one day that she was going to leave for another college somewhere else in the region. And me and probably 3 or 4 other colleagues said, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And there was a deputy, But we, as a kind of a group of 4 or 5 senior lecturers at the time, didn't have a huge degree of confidence that that was going to provide us with what we need in terms of leadership. So we effectively drew straws, and well, I drew the short straw, and applied for the job. And genuinely, the rest is history. I found it rewarding and engaging and creative in a way that I hadn't anticipated it would. I was an illustrator. I was a creative. I enjoyed painting pictures, and I didn't really have any interest at all in, how do I say this without offending anybody, climbing the slippery pole. I just wasn't interested. Yeah. I had no motivation to do it. I wanted to be creative, but actually I found that working with others and, creating something, a department, a mission, was hugely creative, just as creative and just as rewarding, but probably on a bigger scale because you're impacting, well, I suppose in retrospect, you're impacting more people more positively. It's not a selfish act. It's much more selfless, and I just got a real kick out of it. I really loved it.
Yeah, and it goes full circle. If we talk about the impact that you're having here at Yeovil College, and we put that to a side, and we talk about the fact that you impacted that one person 30 years ago, maybe a little bit less than that, maybe 25 years ago. That person is now impacting, 30 people a week? Yeah. Maybe 60 people a week?
Probably.
Right, so if we actually add up the total amount of impact you can have in this position today and the positions that you've occupied all the way up to the slippery pole, as you say, not my words, look at all the people's lives you touched along the way. And through great leadership, look at the impact that you can have.
I think that's probably true.
Less of a slippery pole, I think, then. So is that what's kept you? What keeps you in further education?
Making a difference. If you're going to kind of really distill it down, making a difference. I am interested in making a difference for our community. When the principal's role arose here, which was a surprise at the time, on the job description was stated really clearly that the principal must live locally or commit to living locally. And I think the chair of corporation at the time, really inspirational woman called Jackie Dean, she was really clear that to provide effective leadership within a community, you must live in that community. And I think she's spot on. The making a difference piece is the thing probably that motivates me the most. And suppose I am an accidental principal. I genuinely am. I hadn't anticipated I would be principal.
Someone told you to apply and you went, that seems like a good idea.
John, actually. And I did. And so I suppose there was never any great design. I look at peers around the country who are doing fab jobs, and it seems clear in terms of the positions that they've occupied that was an intention. There was a plan. They were a deputy principal somewhere, and then they became a principal in a small college, and then a principal in a slightly bigger college, and eventually leading a very big college group. And that's not how I see it. I'm not sure I could be as effective in a circumstance where I've not got connection to the community, where there's not the same point. I think the effort that's required in this kind of role and the hours that are required to be successful mean that it can't be transactional. No. It's got to be driven by what's within you. And I suppose, as a consequence, I am entirely content to be here working for this community. My kids play football and netball and go to dance classes and acting classes in small community village halls and such, and standing with other parents in those little venues on a Wednesday night or a Thursday night or a Monday night or on a Sunday afternoon in the rain. That's the point. That is the point. Yeah. So being part of a community and trying to make a difference in a community is something that motivates me and will keep me ticking for as long as I'm required to.
What advice would you give to someone then looking to get into FA?
Give it time. I think give it time to see whether or not what it can give you in terms of your personal life and your professional life is well suited. It's hard in the first instance. It's particularly hard the first year. It gets a little bit easier in years 2 and 3, and it's only really after year 3 that you get into a bit of a stride and you know what to expect next. But within the first year, it's all brand new. and every part of the year is a little bit different. So the curriculum you're delivering is across that year. All the things that you do across that year are done once across that year. And so it's really challenging in the first instance. So my advice would be give it time. Give it time and you will have a more rewarding career, I'd argue, than almost anything else you could do. Working with people to motivate, inspire, and give them the tools that they need to live better, if that's the right word, better lives, or at least the lives that they want to live. And then watching them go on and succeed in that is a hugely motivating and really inspiring.
And I totally agree. We have in FE a 1-year problem where lots of people get out before the end of the first year. So we struggle with that retention piece, but first year, because in FE we also have the trap, which is they do a year and they're hooked. The addiction is real for the exact reasons you've just stressed, I think. But that first year is chopping.
It's tough. And I think the sector hasn't done itself many favours. I think in all the time that my induction in further education was to be handed a City and Guild syllabus for a programme on a Friday evening at about
an hour before?
5:30. Well, about half an hour beforehand, and to be told that that's it, off you go. We are better than that now, but we're not a lot better than that now. And I think there's some real thought required about how do we give individuals who are new to further education the most structured, not softest landing, because if we insulate it too much, people won't really get a proper blast of what it's like. But if we can give them a different experience over the first few weeks and the first few months, and then onwardly from that towards the end of the first year, I think we would have a better attrition than we have right now. I think we lose people from the sector prematurely because when we do recruit someone, it's because we've got a space. Yes. There is no one there to teach those students, and so there is there's the requirement right away to get them in front of students, and actually that's not going to lead to a lot of success. So I think we've got a lot of thinking to do about how do we make that happen. I think enough college leaders know in a common sense respect how you would change that. It's not rocket science in any way, but the spare funding
how do we pay
to make that happen is just currently not there.
I was about to say, most private sector organisations have succession planning. There is a backstop for a backstop for a backstop for a backstop. They are training the next generation of each role in situ constantly. They're investing people into management programs, investing people into technical expertise because they can afford to do so. And I don't think there's a college in the country that if I said money was no object, could you get people to stay longer than a year without paying them a bigger salary? They would say yes, and they would be able to do it. But funding is the single biggest issue.
I mean, to be fair, we have that succession plan within our risk management approach. So wherever we've got a key role within the organisation, we've got succession for it. But the thing which has dried up significantly over the last 10 years, which was more abundant in the previous decade and then was really common in the decade before that, is that individuals who had a career in X would do a little bit of part-time teaching in further education. And there was a lot of that about, there were dozens and dozens and dozens of colleagues in any one normal-sized college who would be working very part-time, between 2 hours and 6 hours a week. And so there was always a pool of individuals who were looking to take up full-time or more substantive part-time roles in further education, because the truth of the matter was, terms and conditions by comparison to other industries back then was better. Further education, as a senior lecturer in further education, you were paid pretty well in the mid 90s and late 90s, and that compared better than to most vocation pathways. But that's not true anymore, particularly in those areas such as construction, advanced manufacturing, digital, health, where those sectors now pay significantly better than further education.
40% behind. And we're 10%, we're 10k a year, 20% behind schools. But we are leagues behind the industry and the pace that industry moves at in terms of technology they get to use. But what's then the biggest misconception that people hold about further education? What do you think when they're coming in? What do they think's true that isn't?
6 weeks off. In the summer.
Right.
I think that's probably the most common misconception.
That's schools, not colleges.
But quite. On a more serious note, I think that everyone who comes to further education, who enjoyed further education in their own journey, has an idea about what it was like when they were young, when they were 16 and 17 and 18. And as a consequence, you get quite different views of, or quite different expectations depending on who it is you're recruiting. So if it's a vintage even more senior than me, you often have this kind of real entrenched view about indentured apprenticeships and how the craft was taught and standards, etc., particularly in those very practical areas. And an expectation of a 16-year-old, which is just not really true anymore. Whereas as you get down through the vintages, as it were, and you pick someone up who might be in their early 30s or late 20s, they've just got a slightly more realistic view of what a young person might be like now. And they have a softer landing, for want of a better description. Interestingly, those who join us later in their careers are infinitely more patient.
Yes.
With learners, and they offer them a more rounded package in terms of the right balance between hard messages, providing clarity on expectation, keeping people on the straight and narrow, and a bit of kind of paternal or at least supportive care. So I think that, the most common misconception is it's going to be easy and I'm going to get a better work-life balance.
I wouldn't come into FE for work-life balance. It's not that people have got to do marking at 9 o'clock at night every night. There's not a huge stack of marking. It's that these students, these outcomes are going to fill your brain, right?
The work is people.
Yeah.
And that just pulls you in, because you're fighting for people. You want to do your best for those people. And those of us who've worked in education for a long time have a deep sense of, I suppose, this sounds really, it's a sense of moral purpose. Yeah. We are absolutely committed to those individuals that we said we would help. And so when people are built of the right stuff, they will go to the end of the earth for those students who are in their care that year. And normally to their own detriment. They make sacrifices in their own life to support those students in pursuit of their success. And so, because the work is people, 80% of the work is people, that's, I don't know if addictive's the right word, but it just gets you, it hooks you, and you battle for those individuals every single week of every single year.
And you have to. In FE, you have to go out and fight for what's right for your people and what's right for your students, because it's not a given in the current environment that they're going to get that best possible service because the government doesn't fund it properly. But if you go out there and take everything you can, you network with key stakeholders, you can really drive a passionate outcome for students. So tell me a little bit about Freddie, which I think is your values, because I saw them on the way in.
Well, Freddie, it's a tool we use with our students more than anything else. It underpins just being a good person. It helps wrap up neatly our work in and around safeguarding, our work in and around fundamental British values, our work in and around being a good citizen in a way which is fairly easy to remember. It's common sense stuff about just being a good human being. So that's there for our students. It's there in the form of Freddie so that our students can remember it and recall it easily. It's used in all sorts of pastoral work that we do with our students. It transfers to our Students' Union and our kind of learner voice board. And it's there for our students. It's aimed at students. From a college perspective, our organisation, we went through an exercise which sounds really mechanical, and it's not really. We endeavoured to build a new strategic plan back in 2021 as we were coming out the back end of COVID. The strategic plan that framed the previous 5 years was coming to a conclusion, and we needed a refresh. From another organisation, another time, I was really interested in describing mission, vision, values and culture, including behaviours. So we went around a piece of work and we built a strategic plan which included those things I just mentioned from the bottom up. We held numerous staff sessions and corporation governor sessions where we ended up with 600 plus statements, the things that people wanted to achieve in their work at Yeovil College. It was kind of the full engagement with all of the staff. Colleagues across the organisation will remember my Miro boards with fear because it was a challenge for some. So we built a series of 600 statements, which were the things that people strategically wanted to achieve within the organisation or for the organisation, and then we distilled them over time. Well, actually, it wasn't we; it was me. I sat in a dark room with an Excel spreadsheet and lots photocopies, and I distilled those 600 statements into about 20.
Right.
And those 20-ish strategic statements, I then gathered under themes, and the themes are pretty much the curriculum, the running of the operation, our business community and collaboration, and our colleagues. And it is aspirational, exceptional, collaborative, and Team YC. And so we've got a statement neatly under each one of those things. We've articulated them as strategic goals. We've articulated them as high-level framing for the college. We've articulated them as values, and we've articulated them as behaviours. So it's really clear about who we are. There's a few other things I could say, which I'm hoping colleagues throughout the organisation can say. And this is really, I think, college-specific. I grew up in the Northeast through the 70s and 80s, and that underwent a very, very significant recession. The traditional industries that people left to from school disappeared during the 70s and 80s. They were all making-based jobs, whether they were shipyards or coal mines. They allowed one person in a household to work hard and provide for the family. Yep. And not that I particularly advocate that as a way of living.
That was the way of the world at that point.
That was tradition. And I suppose, when I left school and started to pursue a career, that this wasn't a thing. It wasn't possible. And so I'm really interested in adding value and making-based economies. There's something really interesting about South Somerset, North and West Dorset, where it sticks out as a bit of a spike on GVA per household. It's got a high density of defence manufacturers and advanced manufacturers working with some pretty interesting stuff. Cutting edge is used too often, I think, and bleeding edge is another really odd term. But we've got businesses here who are inventing new technologies and materials and applications for materials and technologies that will go into equipment now that will be in operation for 30 years. This is really, really forward-hitting stuff. And there's a stat that does the rounds in our local patch here that because of these manufacturers and the work that they do, they add about £7,000 per household per year, a real peak in GVA. And so I was really interested in that. And those businesses pay really good wages. And they employ thousands and thousands of people locally. And so we really focused on how do we support those businesses be successful? How do we give them access to the skilled workforce that they need? How do we upskill their workforce in a way which is not just about here today and tomorrow-ish, but really what sort of product are they going to produce in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years' time? Whether that's about autonomous systems or new propulsion systems or unmanned systems. We started to really think about that. And about 7 or 8 years ago, we really started to focus in on those value-adding sectors. And almost all of our endeavour since has been about those sectors which add value and create wealth in an economy. So we focused on a making-based economy as opposed to a service-based economy. Thinking that simply, if you drop a quid into a making-based economy, as it passes from one business to another, something gets added to the pound.
And it will go through the service economy at some point anyway.
More people on better jobs with better money will spend that locally on all those things that they like to do at a weekend and an evening. So I think you're right. So we've really focused on that. And we've got a really simple line. As a consequence of that thinking, our job is to support our business community's success and prosperity. Their success and prosperity is the success of our community. We are just part of that community, then we serve them. And so we can serve them best by supporting those businesses to provide more and better jobs for those young people and not so young people who want careers in those sectors.
So your college, to distill that down in layman's terms for me, your college is keenly at the cutting edge or the bleeding edge of creating genuine outcomes for its community.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we've got mixed up in stuff that we've got no right as a small college at the bottom of Somerset to be mixed up in. Hydrogen systems, we've got a hydrogen rig, we've got a cell tech rig, we've got a digital factory, and the list goes on and on and on of stuff that really a college of our size and type probably wouldn't normally be involved in.
But naffle
But
that,
we are.
because that is what your local, and this is, Ofsted will see this the same way I do, I hope, with the sensible lens. Skills demand, local skills need. Go and address it, and you will be rated highly. Yes, make sure the delivery is perfect. Yes, round the learner to make sure they leave better than you found them in all sorts of ways, not just for a job. But fundamentally, take what your employers need and create it.
And then, you know, at the other end of that, which is absolutely focuses us day to day, is do what you say you're going to do. You know, for our students, make sure that there's a lecturer there who's highly skilled and very capable. Don't cancel classes. Don't move students around. Make sure a right student, right course, and support them with everything that you've got from day to day, week to week. So, you know, do all the, we call it basics, do all the basics to a really high standard every single day. Make sure that the curriculum's well planned, well sequenced, and delivered in a really brilliant way, in great learning environments that learners are going to be inspired and motivated by, but also push for your employers. And I suppose, you know, the best way for me to describe that is I'm really interested in value chain. How can I give the local businesses a new member of their workforce a set of skills and knowledge that's going to help them earn a bit more per hour? So rather than charging their service out for 50 or 60 or £100 an hour, how can I give them a new employee who's worth 100 quid, 120 quid, 150 quid an hour, so that business can just move itself up the value chain?
So your strategic plan, your mission, your goals, it was built using the organisation. It was taken from the very ground up. How do we now embed that for people that weren't here when it was created? Because yes, it's the feeling they get from the walk through the doors.
We talk back to it all the time. Because there's only 20 odd points to remember, that's scattered all across the college. I hold pretty regular meetings with colleagues. We've got all the normal stuff that you'd expect, like JNC. But we have, joint negotiating committee where we meet with our union representatives. But once a month, as a minimum, I meet with, every single department has a rep. And they come to a meeting once a month called Staff Voice. Excuse me. And at Staff Voice, we have two. We have an academic staff voice and we have a business support staff voice. Mm-hmm. I meet them in this room. We sit around this table. And every month they share their frustrations. And every month I try and solve as best I can with my colleagues around me and the college leadership team, make those problems less than they were.
You said
so we address
did.
them. You said we did. So we address them on a month-to-month basis. In addition to that, I brief colleagues every month. So we have a whole staff briefing every month. And we talk about our mission, we talk about our goals. We set it out in operational terms. Yep. It's embedded in appraisal and annual reviews. Yep. So there's a big long piece of paper that articulates really clearly what our behaviours are. And every one of our colleagues has got something dead visible and tangible on their annual targets that is contributing.
Their contribution to it.
So it's clear. We're all pulling in the same direction. But yeah, I meet with all new colleagues within the organisation within 6 weeks of them starting. And I say some stuff about what we're here to do, supporting our business community's prosperity and success, and then the other two lines about that. So every single colleague knows that within a couple of weeks of starting here. We talk about shared purpose, the mission for our community. And our success is our last 5-10 years of successful track record is really helpful in leaning back into that. This college is twice as big as it was 6 years ago. And there's twice as many people employed. And we're working with twice as many businesses and almost twice as many learners. And so they can see that hard work has resulted in campus transformation, the winning of 25 million quid of the grants and capital input, great new jobs, hundreds more engineering apprentices, hundreds more construction apprentices. This is having an impact on families' lives in this community. And I talk to them about that. I talk what the point of our being here is. We're not the point. Outside of our gates is the point. We serve that community. And so all of our colleagues can talk about why we're here. And the other thing I say to our colleagues is like, we haven't got enough money to have made your post just for kicks. You are vital to the college's mission, like absolutely vital. Every single one of us has got a vital role to play in the delivery of our services for our community. So if you see anyone walking around the place, strutting around like they own it, do let us know, because they don't. None of us do. We are absolutely in it together. And I suppose one of the other lines that I use with colleagues, we have got some superstars. We've genuinely got some superstars in our college. But most of us, like me, are not. We're just good, hard-working people with the right values pulling together. And this collective mass of 400 and something of us that there is now, we are pulling together in the same direction for the benefit of our community, for our families and our friends, and for the businesses that we serve. And we are making a big difference. The college is transforming. And that's just good people working together hard. That doesn't seem like, it doesn't, so that's our, that's really at the heart of our culture.
All of those brilliant things we've just listed about the impact for the local workforce, for the way that the world has been shaped and the community has been shaped, how does that leave the workforce feeling? What does that culture do for them?
I think some of the stuff that I value most is not very tangible. It's the corridor conversations that you exchange with individuals who tell you a bit about the day and what the thing that made them happy yesterday or today was. And it's always an anecdote about a learner and something that changed for them that day, that week, that month, some really positive outcome. The conversations that are normally pretty excitable about the thing that's arrived or the work placement that's just been achieved or the bit of feedback from an employer about the T-level learner designing a new thing to take on a helicopter, or the learner who is on a supported internship who's just got a 35 grand a year job as a data analyst. Those kinds of things are the less tangible but much more, much more joyful and impactful things. And then if you want to distill it right down to hard metrics, our QDP staff survey results are just off the scale.
Yeah, engagement. A really interesting tool that we utilise in our business is, I'm not going to name too much about it because it's quite commercially sensitive, but we have a thing called a good news robot. And basically every bit of good stuff that happens, every minute of the day, pings into this massive conversation. And everyone is in it. So all those anecdotes that you're talking about that go around the college that aren't recorded, in our business are recorded. Every good bit of feedback, every first interview with a new client, every new vacancy, every bit of good news that fuels our day, that gets us excited, comes into a melting pot in the middle. And you would think that over time that becomes desensitized. And arguably it goes through periods where some days everyone's on it, constantly replying, shouting, celebrating, cheering. Other days they're getting 6-7 engagements and it's not huge. But whenever anyone wants a good cheer up, they come to this thing. Is there a way that we can capture more of those little anecdotes and make them into a bigger thing? Yeah,
there probably is. We collect it digitally, but it's still fairly analog. So each department has a good news spreadsheet. So there is something that we can lever and scrape in terms of data. It's all stored centrally on our SharePoint. There's a bit of a transformation task force being created at the minute. It's an idea that we've got that we're moving on with some fair intent. So a whole bunch of us did a lean business improvement techniques program before the summer, and we're running really high volumes of AI boot camps.
Yep.
And so we're going to create, 10% or so of the workforce who've done both things, both a BIT program, so kind of really getting to grips with process, mapping process, understanding process, removing inefficiencies from processes, removing all duplications of processes, and then automating it all with AI tools. So 10% of us by the end of this academic year will have done both the AI bootcamp and the lean program, and we will create a task and finish group to just nail that.
And 10% is what you need to be the early adopters to filter into the rest of the organisation. It's not an accident, is that?
No.
So in your world, how important is values-driven leadership to a college?
The amount of discretionary effort that's required to be successful in further education is more than is fair. And so if that's what's required for success, people have to be motivated, and more money won't motivate you enough to put in that kind of discretionary effort for the kinds of outcomes and impact that we want to see in further education. So, values and the culture of the organisation has got to be at the core of that. And so, having our 4 core values about aspirational, exceptional, collaboration and Team YC just speak to that in such clear terms that people understand what the point of their discretionary effort is and what impact it's going to have on what we do for our community.
Why do people work at Yeovil College? Other than culture, other than salary, why do they come here?
I think they come for all sorts of different reasons. They stay because of our alignment, because of our shared sense of purpose, our mission for our community to make the people's lives better who want to have their lives improved, whether they be young or old. That's why they stay. I think we've been clear enough about what we stand for. We articulate that clearly in our job ads. So hopefully the words we use to try and attract the right kinds of people are sufficiently good that it talks enough to them. Our staff attrition rate is really low and dropping. It saw a really big spike after COVID.
Yep.
That was a really unusual thing that we hadn't seen previously. It's settled right down in this last couple of years, and it's now less than 5%. So we're really pleased with that. There's still some stubborn areas. Construction's still challenging. Health is, I would say, the most challenging. And traditionally, engineering and advanced manufacturing was a challenge, but it's not anymore.
Not when you've built the workforce of the future locally, so that people know that we're a hub of innovation here. So what does the college do to support people's progression? Because that's part of the reason attrition falls, right?
What does it do? We have a succession strategy. We have leadership management. We have a formal leadership management program for all our CLT members, for all of our SLT members. We have a Rise and Stars program. How many? 14 at last count. There's 14 on this year's Rise and Stars program. We have a single points of failure risk register for all roles within the organisation that would present us with a problem if we lost someone. Every single one of those individuals on that single points of failure risk register is on a pathway. Yep. That closely manages their progression, what they think their future holds, and how we manage to match stride by stride so that we grow with them.
Yep.
And we create the role on an ongoing basis that they would want to fill in a 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time.
As much as the organisation will allow, I think, is really critical there. I've always, the first conversation I have with any new hire is, what are your goals? I give them a pen and a whiteboard and say, go and tell me what it is you want to achieve in your life. It's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, I couldn't care less. Can you articulate your goals? The next conversation I'll probably have with them after they've been offered, after they've started, is, right, let's articulate your goals and how does my business align with those? And how can we now shape what you're trying to achieve in your career with what we've got? Because I believe that fundamentally people align with you. And the time where people leave is when your goals and their goals begin to not align,
I
right?
think that's really
COVID's an interesting one. They wanted to spend more time with their family. That's probably what it was, right? I haven't got your data, but they spend time together. They want to, and you're, at the moment, it all aligned, but then it all changes, and they now push in different directions. And that's the breakaway. But as long as your goals align with their goals, you can stay together for a very, very long time. And that's...
We've got some really long-serving members of staff. Family members, we've got lots and lots of colleagues here who've got other family members here. That's really, I think, quite unusual. And we're not talking about one or two here, we're talking about dozens.
Yes.
Dozens.
But that's the word of FE. We support each other.
Yeah, I think it's true. Yeah, so, they stay, I think, because they feel like they're making a difference, and we're well aligned.
And if there's one thing you could do for your staff, and I have a sense, I know what you're going to say here, what would it be?
I'd give them the reward that they deserve, whatever that means. Some people are looking for salary increases so that they can buy more opportunities for their families, and some are looking for something else. I would want to be able to give them more for their effort that they provide here.
Who is your standout role model? Who is your standout role model? Who is the person that you look to for some of this?
There's three.
3 people.
Yeah, there's 3 people. 2 are in the past.
Yep.
one's kind of transition in the past and the present. So the very first one was when I was a student in further education. It was a bloke called Jeff Johnson. He was the lecturer who made the biggest difference in my life. Absolute legend. He was a painter, and he gave me all the great habits that I carry on through the rest of my life. He introduced us to cycling in a big way. He introduced us to reading for fun in a big way, and he changed the course of my life. I'll be forever in his debt. He was an absolute legend. And then, but sadly, he's no longer with us. And he was further education through and through. A highly regarded international artist who chose to work in further education as opposed to higher education. And that said everything about Jeff. And then the next person who I stumbled across, who really made a lasting impact, was a mentor. I worked in a college in the Northeast that wasn't doing brilliantly for lots and lots of different reasons, mainly to do with money and discontinuity leadership. And I stumbled across someone, I was given someone by the LSC as a mentor, and he was called Jim Horrocks. And he was a principal who was accredited with building the Barnfield group of colleges in the 90s. And 2000s, and he was truly inspirational. I think when I started to spend some time with him, he was already in his 70s with Parkinson's, and he travelled from his home in the Midlands up to Northumberland to provide mentorship for.
That is not an easy train route, I can tell you that for a fact.
Some 30-odd-year-old leader, and he was incredible. He was incredible. Imparted all sorts of knowledge that are really instrumental today still about leadership and about some of the mechanics of further education. He was the person who made us understand that you should keep it as simple as possible. And that served all sorts of different outcomes. He was incredible. And then the other person who had the biggest impact professionally on my life is your previous interviewee, John Evans. He popped up in my life in 2007-8 when I was looking after a construction engineering and automotive department. He provided 3 or 4 days of consultancy in terms of teaching, learning and assessment. He converted the most diehard skeptic in that in those teaching teams. And he was quality, he was real quality. And then completely fortuitously, a role at Yeovil College came up in 2015. If I'm really honest, I wasn't actually sure precisely where Yeovil was. It was definitely south of Newcastle. And there was John's face on the ad. I had no interest in pursuing a job in the southwest at the time. And I inadvertently, I don't know if you remember the days of really, really poor broadband and internet, but instead of clicking the X button in the top right-hand corner, I had inadvertently clicked a click-through, and John's face popped up. And if it hadn't have been for really rubbish broadband, I don't think I'd have been here.
Yeovil College, if you're listening, he doesn't mean it. He does love you. But
well, I do now. Absolutely. It's completely under my skin now. But yeah, John's face popped up and I thought, gosh, when I met him in 2008, he was really brilliant. I'm going to give him a ring. So I gave him a ring and I put a job application in and then John interviewed us and it was a most unorthodox interview. I got the job and he wanted to start as early as possible. I did start as early as possible, and then for a year almost, I commuted, flew back to the Northeast every weekend.
Bristol Airport to Newcastle?
Yeah, Bristol Airport to Newcastle. A couple of times in the summer, I was not prepared for the M5 corridor and missed the flight. Sat on the M5 and watched the flight take off.
Yeah, you can see it.
Went down brilliantly at home. And the rest is history. I just love the place. The quality of life here is exceptional. Really exceptional. You've got the South Coast, 20 odd minutes away. You've got the Blackdown and the Quantock Hills. You've got Salisbury, Bath, Exeter, Bournemouth, Bristol.
I've got a shout out.
All with it. Bristol's great. You know, like there's some really brilliant places with some brilliant people, and the opportunities for young people in the Southwest and around this area particularly are truly exceptional. The quality of jobs available. and what they can give young people in terms of successful careers and really fulfilling careers is why I brought the rest of the family down. So it's me, my Mrs. Catherine, and our 3 kids. And we live just 10 miles down the road. If I do an extra loop on my bike, it's about 20 miles home.
Take the wrong side.
Up some big hills. And there's just a great work-life balance.
It sounds to me like personal development and culture are massively important to you and to the college. So what are you actively undertaking in terms of your own personal development at the moment?
With my SLT colleagues, I am undertaking an L&M programme with them.
Sat in it with them?
Yeah, in it with them. Totally in it with them, yeah.
Brilliant.
Totally in it with them. We're going through the same experience together. Same with our CLT. Literally, it's not sheep dip, but we're all going through the same experience. So we get a common language, common understanding, good alignment, and we develop together. But the one with the SLT, that's been really interesting. I don't know, I think I did my first L&M programme back in, 2005, 6. It was the old LSIS, the Learning Skills Improvement Service, who ran it. And I remember it. I remember it really well. And I enjoyed it, and I used it for decades. Got loads and loads out of it. And although the themes are not new, the kind of reoccurring themes that I've gone back to over the last 20 years, each time you visit it with colleagues, it brings something new. And you talk about it in your own context, within your own organisation, in a way which is more meaningful and makes a bigger difference because it's applied, it's genuine. It's not the theory of leadership or management, it's doing it for real, and applying it for real with colleagues and the organisation. And that's been really interesting. I've really enjoyed it. There was one memorable one earlier this calendar year where I left the room for a few hours because that was the instruction, and my peers had to sit and work out what they were going to tell me to stop doing, what they were going to ask me to continue doing, and what they were going to ask me to start doing, and that was really, really helpful.
Stop, start, continue.
And it was funny that they were most apprehensive about sharing their consensus, and I didn't take it in the least bit in a negative way. It's really helpful.
Feedback is vital to us to thrive.
So that's been really enjoyable, and every day's a learning day, isn't it? And I think if you're not
lifelong,
if you're not stretching yourself, if you're not pushing yourself to be better every day, then I think you probably should get out.
Maybe not every day, every week.
Wow.
Every day's a bit harsh.
Is it?
Wow. It's your ethos.
The work we do really matters. There's thousands of young people relying on us to be better tomorrow than we were today, and I think that's a responsibility, and so you have to be pushing it.
Less compromise. You can have a bad day, but the intention's
yeah, fair play.
What would be your advice then to future leaders looking to progress within further education?
Don't compromise. You'll have been working in further education for probably a decade or more, and all the things that you got into, all the reasons that kept you in further education, working with students every day, hold on to them. Make sure that your decisions are based on doing the right things for your learners. Make sure that you focus on building great relationships with internal and external colleagues, because to lead a college well, it is an entirely collaborative endeavour. We coexist with our community. The success of our employers is the success of our college community, our students. And so you have to realise that. You have to understand that it's incredibly hard work, but it's the most inspiring, the most rewarding job that I think I could have chosen to do, and I couldn't recommend it more highly. But it's tough. It's tough.
It's never been easy. You've got so many different competing agendas and so many different challenges that form the melting pot, and in that is the beauty of the job. And thank you, Mark. That was crazy.
Thank you.
That was a very enjoyable whirlwind of a journey, and I really thank you for sharing so candidly your experience in further education, your journey, and so much in such a short period of time about Yeovil College.
It's my pleasure.
And I look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you for your time.